My specialty really is around scaling revenue. Like the experiences that I had at LinkedIn and Cameo were around helping businesses grow from 1 to 15 million, scale from 40 to 120 million. And all of that go-to-market expertise, both in operations and sales leadership, have been incredibly helpful as I've been working with startups in helping to take what is working for them and to build their revenue engines. One of the product-led sales organizations that I built at LinkedIn was around how to introduce product-led into an organization that has been traditionally sales-led. Right? We can talk about alignment all we want, but the rubber really hits the road when you hit go and you try to figure out who's a lead, who's a product qualified lead, whether sales agrees or not. Our experience, I would say in the early days at LinkedIn, was that it was a little bit of a no. And I think I've spoken with you and the warm lead team about this as well. Treating your self-service channel as a glorified lead gen channel is a losing situation for everyone involved.
All right. Very excited to have Karen Chi on the show today. She's been a growth mentor of Warmly's, especially as we're navigating how to run a product-led sales motion here. She's had 15 plus years of experience building sales and revenue operations organizations, most recently as VP of B2B sales at Cameo and head of SMB sales and account management at LinkedIn. What's Karen currently up to right now? She's taking a leap of faith. She started her own business, Karen Chi Consulting, where she helps early stage B2B companies unlock their next phase of growth. And also on the side, she runs her own small venture fund as well. The main topic for today is going to be product-led sales, how to do it, how to introduce it, and how to be successful. Karen, it's great to have you on the show today.
Thank you. Thrilled. It's nice to see you again too, Alan.
Great to see you as well. I know it's been a couple months, but excited for this one. So let's dive into a quick background about yourself. Tell me about your upbringings, how you got to where you are today.
Oh my goodness. Child of immigrants. My parents were both from Taiwan. And I think there's a whole bunch of baggage and honor and pride that comes with that. Growing up, the career advice I got was you pick a lane and you work your ass off and you expect to be recognized for that hard work, right? Having a career that was much more of a portfolio or had a lot of diversity and expertise really wasn't something on my parents' generation. My career path was twisty. I really started as a systems consultant and probably did the biggest 180, if that's possible. I guess a 180 is a 180. And made my way into sales leadership and go-to-market executive roles at both LinkedIn and Cameo. Coming out of my career break after Cameo, I made the decision to really start my own thing. I wanted to be much more deeply rooted in the world of venture, in the world of startups, in particular, investing my time with early stage founders.
And why did you decide to make that leap? We dive in a little bit deeper there.
Yeah, when I was coming out of my career break from after leaving Cameo, I think I thought that I had spent a good amount of time being incredibly thoughtful and intentional about what I wanted this next chapter of my career to look like. And for me, it was very much around what are the types of problems I want to solve? What are the types of people I want to work with? But I just jumped right back on the I'm going to get a full-time job train. And as I was having conversations with various companies, incredible people, incredible companies, I still didn't feel that sort of pull. And what I started to realize late last summer was that I think having had such an incredible time at LinkedIn and then an amazing role at Cameo, I had the expectation in my head, and I also thought others might too, of me, was that I had to have the most amazing next role to continue on that same trajectory, like the hot company that was growing, the big ass job, earning all the right dollars. And as I was having conversations with these various companies, it just, I don't know, it didn't gel. And I think those perceived or imagined expectations of me led me astray. And so late last year, I really put a stake in the ground and worked on shifting my network. I networked like it was my full-time job, meeting with as many investors, founders, people in the startup ecosystem as I could. And I'm pretty happy with the sorts of seeds that have started to sprout in what I'm doing now.
Tell me a little bit more about what you're doing right now.
I am, for the most part, I'm working with early stage B2B startups. My specialty really is around scaling revenue. With the experiences that I had at LinkedIn and Cameo were around helping businesses grow from 1 to 15 million, scale from 40 to 120 million. And all of that go-to-market expertise, both in operations and sales leadership, have been incredibly helpful as I've been working with startups in helping to take what is working for them and to build their revenue engines. I'm also running a small venture fund on the side. By the time this podcast episode is live, we will have launched. We're actually launching next week. This fund is one that a few former and current LinkedIn colleagues of mine and I are raising from current and former LinkedIn employees, earmarked for investing in companies founded by former LinkedIn employees. So we're launching next week to coincide with LinkedIn's birthday because that's cute. Invest Ventures.
That's so exciting. And you also have this angle of investing and helping underestimated founders. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Thank you so much for asking about that. I think one of the most magical things that I've really liked about me taking this path at this point in my career is that I get to choose where I spend my time and perhaps more importantly, who I spend that time with. And so one of the areas where I've been really intentional about where I spend my time and energy is with underestimated founders, right? So those folks who may not have been given the benefit of the doubt. A lot of that has been my own lived experience, right? A woman in tech, Asian American woman in tech. And I'm really happy to be able to help share, provide access, create opportunities for those like me.
Do you think it's given you advantage to come from a different background?
You mean from I have a different point of view, perhaps, to add to the mix? I think so. I think I spent a large part of the early part of my career trying to be like everyone else. And the sameness felt, I think, perhaps a bit more safe. And as I've grown in my career, I think I've embraced the changes and the differences much more. Even me taking this path of going out on my own and shifting the shape of my network, incredibly scary to me. But the initial reaction that I got from friends or perhaps colleagues, even mentors were, do people actually do that? Do you really understand the risks involved in that? I had a lot of support too as well, right? But the path is non-traditional, I would say. But what I found was that actually that the difference is that you do find lots of other people who are doing what you're doing, and it somewhat normalizes it for you. And so I think back to your question around whether that being a lived experience actually helps to create an advantage. Yeah, I would definitely say so.
When the path is not so direct, you have to forcibly make it work. Like it wasn't laid out for you. And so that in and of itself is a skill to, when you have all these obstacles in place that maybe didn't exist for other people, to surmount those obstacles. That is a skill in and of itself. And it probably led you down the path of entrepreneurship, other like-minded people. That makes sense.
I think so. Yeah.
So let's jump into the meaty topics of discussion here. Signal-based selling, product-led go-to-market. What are these things? What should people know about them?
Yeah, having spent such glorious years at LinkedIn, I grew up in an environment career-wise, right, where data was plenty, data scientists were plenty, although perhaps they were always and will continue to be the most scarce resources on earth. And so the idea of selling with signals, it has been around for a long time, right? What I think is interesting is that, and what I mean by signal-based selling, it's who's opened your emails, right? Who is prowling around on your websites? That stuff, I think, has been around for quite some time, right? And so the modern sellers these days can talk about, I've been selling with signals for ages. I say that. Product-led, I think, is incredibly interesting. I don't think of LinkedIn as one of these companies that is known in the circles of the great product-led companies like a Notion or a Canva. Its product-led is entirely around interpreting how your customers, whether they're free or paid, are engaging with your product and figuring out what can I actually interpret from those sorts of behaviors? How are they using the products? How are they not using the products? What might the onboarding experience feel like from their perspective based on how successfully they are using our products? I just spent the early part of last week in San Francisco at a conference that I think is becoming more well-known. It was the second year of a conference called PLGTM. So shout out to Dave Rigotti and team for hosting amazing 2 days of thought leaders and speakers from some of the best known product-led companies. It's incredible that there is a community large enough that is passionate about PLG that there's an entire conference around it now.
No, we actually had him on the podcast not too long ago. I'm a very big fan of what he's doing as well.
Amazing. Yeah, big fan.
Yeah, he's great. So tell me a little bit more about how you're supposed to set up product-led growth motions, product-led sales motions. You've done it at LinkedIn, you've done it at Cameo. They're implemented in two different ways. The results are pretty different too. Can we walk through one of these examples or both?
Yeah, for starters, right? I think product-led, and the areas that I worked most closely were leading and building sales organizations that were product-led sales. But I guess for starters, just for basics, I think a lot about who needs to be involved in helping to make something like product-led successful. Cross-functional alignment, which is an area of, I would say, leadership and just business acumen that I particularly love. Perhaps that's why I'm so attracted to product-led stuff. It requires the buy-in, so the alignment and the buy-in of, I would say, three functions: product, marketing, and sales. So I talk about these as the holy trio, but there's really the fourth that is all around all the time, everywhere, all knowing, and that is the data that you're able to glean from how your customers are interacting with your product and your marketing as well. I think one of the big learnings that I took away from one of the product-led sales organizations that I built at LinkedIn was around how to introduce product-led into an organization that has been traditionally sales-led. Right? We can talk about alignment all we want, but the rubber really hits the road when you hit go and you try to figure out who's a lead, who's a product qualified lead, whether sales agrees or not. Our experience, I would say, in the early days at LinkedIn was that it was a little bit of a no. And I think I've spoken with you and the Warmly team about this as well. Treating your self-service channel as a glorified lead gen channel is a losing situation for everyone involved. It's for the customer, it's for marketing, it's for sales, it's for product. And what I mean by that is in our early days at LinkedIn, we actually started doing product-led sales before the self-service experience was robust enough to help customers who were onboarding themselves to feel like they could be self-sufficient, right? And to feel like they could really understand the value of the platform that they were using. So I talk about this as being your self-service experience should be one where you're thinking about taking the customer from 0 to 1, right? Ideally more than that, but perhaps sales can pick up the baton at 1 and take them to 100. When we think about a self-service experience as a glorified lead gen channel, meaning let's attract as many users as we can and mine that data for perceived high potential or up-market upselling, what you actually might create is an experience where you're taking that customer from a 0 to a -1. And we experienced this a bit in the early days at LinkedIn, right? So these users who are coming onto the platform were actually so confused, had no idea really how to use the platform, much less how to get value from it. And we had our salespeople calling them, and rather than being able to take that customer from a 1 to 100 sort of journey, our salespeople were actually providing a ton of customer support, right? And then zooming out from a business perspective, it looked like sales was actually failing at upselling. And so when we really dug in, it uncovered so much goodness around the importance of having a really robust self-service experience. Onboarding and activation, I would say, are do not pass go. If you don't do these things well, you won't have a successful PLS organization.
Yeah, we definitely saw that for Warmly as well. There was a point where we had the salespeople reach out. Derek, our head of product-led sales and product-led growth at the time, he had a lot of friction points with our head of sales and was like, you can't do this. You need to make sure that they're able to experience the product for themselves. It's like the moment they added a script tag, they get sales emails. And we never really could figure out the right balance. When do you know when you've passed go, when they found success, when you should introduce a salesperson? Were there signals? Was there a process? How did you figure that stuff out?
I would say stopgaps we put in place as the self-service experience was catching up to what we thought would be good to great for our customers was we introduced really an onboarding program. So we had people calling. So this is one of those principles of doing things that do not scale, right? For the sake of all the goodness you're going to get from those learnings. And so we had reps who were focused specifically on that very early part of the customer journey. And they would reach out to those new users, not to sell, entirely to offer support and to understand how those new customers were experiencing our platform. A lot of the beauty around setting up a really tightly knit product-led organization is that your salespeople, right, the humans who are interacting with the customers, get so much good feedback that you have to feed back to product and marketing, right? If you don't, a waste. You're learning all this good insight. You should be sending it back into product and marketing to make the self-service and, I guess, self-led experience even better. Those onboarding programs really helped us understand where we needed to be much more robust in product and where we could create more self-help materials. That was our first step, really, before even starting to think about what are the right signals to help indicate when a customer should be ready for upsell.
That's amazing. Yeah, very much resonate with do things that don't scale and then automate later. The way I see salespeople, as you describe them, is it's like customer success. So there's a fifth organization, sales, marketing, product, customer success. Very much downplayed. I feel like customer success, a lot of organizations is seen as support, but it's actually the lifeblood to creating the right product that can actually service customers to produce them the value that they need to achieve their salvation of success. So the sales people playing that role makes a lot of sense. And then what happens next? Now that you've gotten the learnings, do you implement them via help articles? Was it through product marketing, or how did you then scale this?
Really all of the above, right? I remember in those early days, doing a retro on our results, it produced product features, it produced marketing asks, and then it also helped us to think about, well, what should this next generation of the human element look like? And as far as I know, that onboarding program still exists at LinkedIn, proud legacy. But then you start to think about how should these salespeople look, right? In a product-led sales organization, and of course it depends on the segment of customers you're working with. In the ones where I've been operating the longest, these are volume and velocity businesses. The salespeople are ones that I would say are analytical operators. I've always talked about the importance of hiring salespeople who know what to do with data and can glean insights from it. There's so many tools out there now that can just hop directly to insights, but that hasn't always been the case, right? It used to be, here's a massive spreadsheet. What can you do with it? There are now amazing tools, so many amazing tools to help us glean all of those insights. But I think it's incredibly important in these learnings to think about what's the right type of selling profile that makes sense for the product-led organization that you're building.
Could you, for the audience, talk a little bit more about the right selling profile for LinkedIn, the right signals that you guys used over time, and then what you guys did with all the spreadsheets?
So all of the spreadsheets and I would say that spreadsheets married with the insights that we gleaned right from learning from customers was built into homegrown tools that you now see actually having productized in platforms like Focus. Big fan of Focus for that reason. I feel really near and dear to those sorts of platforms. But I mentioned the importance of having analytical salespeople, right? I think that analytical operators, in my observation, always have been and they will continue to be the strongest sellers, right? Modern selling requires that you embrace signals and you have to embrace data, like all levels of the organization, all functions, right? And that's doubly so, I would say, for salespeople these days.
Makes sense. And then the signals that you guys used, at what point, like when did the salespeople know what to action on and what to do next?
Yes, I guess it was two parts, right? So the onboarding program that we developed, we started to understand, hey, actually, the sorts of best practices that we know on the platform are things that we can start to platformize, if that makes sense. And so if, for example, users who performed these 3 steps on the platform tended to stick around longer, then those were the sorts of signals we started to build into the platform. And this was the business specifically that I'm thinking about in this time is LinkedIn's marketing solutions business, so digital advertising, the ads platform. If we know that a customer needs to be spending a certain amount of budget per day, they have this many pieces of creative that they should be rotating in their campaign, then those are the sorts of signals you can look for, right? How successfully have we prodded the customer through the onboarding experience, through the self-help, through learning tidbits in the platform to get them to that bar? And once they have reached that bar, we know with greater confidence that they're actually seeing value from the platform, right? And they're getting results. So therefore, it's a great time for a salesperson to have a much more strategic conversation with that customer.
And they have budget because we know how much we're spending or projected to spend. So now that you have all these data points, what is the outreach approach? Is it consult or is it, do you want to buy, or how do you think about that? Is it through phone? Is it through email?
A lot of business today is still through email, right? I think there's a lot of debate that cold calling is dead. Cold calling is not dead, right? That's always a tactic that salespeople should be using. So outreach in a product-led sales organization, the interesting thing is that you're as a salesperson, you are not reaching out to somebody cold, right? We know so much about the behavior of that customer already, where they're doing well, where they're not doing well. In an evolved PLS organization, what I would ideally like to understand is how has that customer been behaving so far, right? And how do we get that information into the hands of the salesperson so that when they do outreach to the customer, it's totally consultative, right? I see that you've been doing XYZ on the platform. Customers like you tend to see this sort of success when you begin to add this into your repertoire, right? I'm making it up, but the data and the insights in a product-led organization shouldn't just be used internally, right? Play that back to your customers. Show them how we know them and show them how we know them so well that we understand how to help them reach their next level of success.
I really like that. For me personally, I've actually had LinkedIn reach out to me once I was hitting my ad budget or whatever the case, but it didn't always feel like it was pretty interesting. It was like, yeah, you're right. I'm doing ads and I'm having some trouble with it, but I'm just so slammed right now. I don't know if I want to talk to another salesperson. So my question is there anything else you can give? An example of this is if you talk to me, we can sign you up for the special plan. Is there anything like that you guys did to get these guys on the phone?
I love that question. No, not necessarily. I think getting responses, right? Like outbound prospecting, this is in some ways yet another flavor of outbound prospecting, is forever one of those things where there's so much art and science to it. In those days, no, we didn't. What do you all do? I'd love to give me some hacks.
Oh man, it's tough. We haven't really quite cracked it yet, but we're usually like if you don't talk to us right now, we're going to turn it off. And sometimes they respond, no, of course not. But it's not so good because the way I think about the free tier is, and you're going to talk about this later, I'm sure too, is we don't just see them as people that we're going to upsell. We see them as this community that has a two-way dialogue that's going to talk to other people and bring out other clients and then just continue the echo chamber of using Warmly. And so that to me is way more powerful than just a couple more deals in the quarter, to be honest with you. Especially if only like 1 or 2%.
I totally agree. Yeah, I think it goes back a little bit to the making sure that even for those folks who are in the freemium experience or who are entirely just self-service, making sure that they're getting that positive 0 to 1, regardless of what their investment might be with Warmly.
Yeah, I see like you said, you called the Holy Trinity, or we added 4 or 5 more to it, but all these pieces kind of work together, build this category of a company. Because it's this metagame of not just trying to get to numbers, but you're trying to win the space at the end of the day from like the highest of high level. Attach yourself to a movement in an evolving industry that is you're trying to help to achieve salvation for, and you want to be number 1 in the category. It doesn't just come down to, are we going to meet sales projections? It's, we want to completely dominate. And so the freemium motion is one of the best ways to do it because of course, lowest barrier of entry. So enablement, help, product, all that stuff matters.
I feel like we've gotten a little bit religious, right? Between the Holy Trio or Trinity. You've used the word salvation a couple of times. I guess product-led is religion.
It's religion. I talked about this with my Derek there at PLG Nice leading at marketing, but we think marketing is building a church. It's a separate conversation.
Tell me more
but
about that.
The religion is the belief system of how you're helping your customer solve a problem. Like they have an existential problem, and then there's salvation of what it looks like at the other end. And then your doctrines and your Bible is your playbook to help them achieve salvation. And instead of popes, missionaries, you have customers, advocates, influencers, ecosystem partners who are going to preach on your behalf. And so marketing is much more participatory rather than building an audience and just saying these things. It's like people saying it for you and preaching it on your behalf. I don't think Jesus had a very big budget.
It sounds like you've been hanging out with my pastor dad, and he has somehow, infused his work into Warmly.
Yeah, if he did, I'm really happy because it's been going pretty well. So we must have had a conversation around 6 months ago because that's when we started adopting this practice. But that's how we think about it. And yeah, product plays a really important part. So now we talked about LinkedIn. That was one experience. That was the 0 to not even 1, but -1 to start off with. And then we eventually went to 1. Tell me about Cameo. How did that go for you?
Yeah, I know it's a whole different ball game when you're talking about users being the product themselves in some ways, right? And so the way that we thought about product led here at Cameo was really with the talent who are on the platform, right? So the supply side of Cameo's marketplace. And so one of the folks in my team was responsible for thinking about, and every business talks about segmentation, right? In their users and their customers, and certainly in Cameo's case with our talent. And so one of the folks on my leadership team was responsible for thinking about the long tail of Cameo's talent, which was a very long tail, given that at the time that I was there, Cameo had nearly 50,000 talent who were on the platform. Not all of those folks were active though, right? And so the interesting thing about Cameo as a business and the way in which talent use it is that it's to monetize their fame and their influence, right? And for the most part, the way in which talent did that was to receive Cameo requests. What was interesting during my time at Cameo was that the world started to reopen, and the talent who were previously at home, not spending as much time working as they had previously, had lots of time and availability for Cameo. The world reopened. People went back to work, right? Shows were being filmed, movies were being filmed, athletes were playing sports again. We used product-led principles in a lot of ways to drive platform re-engagement, right? So to get talent back to the platform, share with them that they have requests waiting for them, that they earned X dollars, right, with the time that they would spend previously. And so those were little examples of infusing product-led principles into the way that we engaged our talent and our go-to-market really at Cameo.
Got it. So this is very much like growth hacking, like automation, bringing them back to the re-engagement. I'm curious, you said that you also mentioned VP of B2B sales, so there's definitely also a sales component to this.
I had 2 gigs while I was at Cameo, actually. Most of the time that I was there, I spent leading our global talent partnerships organization. So these are the folks who were responsible for acquiring and managing the talent who were on the platform. The other gig that I had was leading B2B sales, right? I led the organization that was responsible for matching brands with the talent who were on the platform for the purposes of content, right? Sponsored content for marketing.
That is a fascinating area that's only expanding here in the B2B space. B2B influencers paired with companies. Very curious about your thoughts on that. How do you pair the right companies to the right influencers?
You know what? It's sometimes the ones that worked the best were the ones where you're like, really? Because it's like it's like the Odd Couple, right? That's a super dated reference, but I don't know, the unexpected combinations, I guess I would say. I think one of the most interesting things that we learned at Cameo, and it's certainly something that I know that a lot of marketers are embracing, especially big brand marketers, is that in the early days of influencer marketing, the ones who were successful were the ones who had the big budgets, right? To have brand sponsorships with A-list talent, the ones who had 1 million followers on Instagram, for example. What we actually found, and this is totally in line with just general trends around influencer marketing, is that micro influencers and engagement actually make much more difference than size of following, right? To the point where on the talent partnership side of the organization, one of the signals, I guess, we looked for in who we thought might make great talent for Cameo was actually on the engagement of their comments on their posts. So you might have talent who have 1 million followers, but a like is cheap, right? You and I both know that likes are cheap, but actually taking the time to write a question, share a comment, hopefully it's not trolling, that costs more. And it's also in some ways a representation of fandom and engagement, right? And what we found and really what we preached at Cameo for our marketing customers was like, go for the micro influencers, right? Take your budget that you were going to spend on that one influencer with 500,000 followers and spend it on 50. And the results were almost always better because the micro influencers have a much more tightly engaged community.
See this all the time. LinkedIn influencer, 100,000 likes. But you look at the engagement and then you see some of these micro influencers with maybe 10,000 followers having thousands of likes. I've seen this happen all the time. The algorithm just changes and it doesn't necessarily reward you for having the most followers. It'll do it if your content or your...
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I think you and I had an exchange about this, right? Like quality of content is what matters these days.
Totally. No. You can have 1 million and you can still get 200 views on TikTok. It's better this way. So my last question is, and we've talked a lot about how LinkedIn does PLS, how Cameo does PLS, but for the salesperson that you bring on, I get it now. They have to be very strategic, data oriented. It's almost like connecting the pieces of all these puzzles together to something that makes sense and then acting on that. Can you walk me through a day in the life of the best PLS sales rep? What do they do? How do they think about it?
Yeah, I'll talk about the rep, but then also the ideal environment in which they're operating. Right? Because I think both are important. So the ideal environment is one in which we're actually serving up these insights to our reps in a way that makes it digestible. And so whether it is a platformized tool or spreadsheets, those insights are incredibly important, right? So timeliness and depth of information is super important. For the successful PLS rep, it's knowing what to do with that information, right? Being able to prioritize and understand, hey, these were actually customers that, let's see, based on what we know of them, their firmographics, whether they are in our sweet spot for what we're trying to sell, potential spend, all of those like old school ways of prioritizing, but then marrying that with the insights around how the user is actually using the product. And then understanding how to take that down and share, well, what a natural next step could be that ideally translates into growth, right? Growth and value for the customer, growth and value for the company that you're working for.
Got it. So the setup is gather all the insights, make it as digestible as possible, do all the data plumbing and beforehand, and they consume what they can, do strategy, do like, how can I curate the best kind of messaging and outreach? And that's what they're focused on. And they should be drowning in these insights so that they can just focus on the ones that have the highest chance of converting.
Yeah, hopefully drowning in insights and not just data.
Insights, not data. Very different things. Karen, it's a pleasure having you on the show today. I know you got stuff to do and I really appreciate the time. How can people find out more about you?
Thank you. I had a blast. I can be found on LinkedIn. I'm usually talking about something product-led related or startup related. I also have my website, karenshi.co. I'm not a big tweeter. Xer? I don't know what we're calling it these days. LinkedIn is generally where you can find me.
Amazing. Please connect with Karen. If you need any help with growth or funding or otherwise, she's a great person to talk to. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Karen.